RSILaguerre. Welcome to Trade School for Monday, what is today? The 21st of January. And I've got a fun little trade school for you guys today. We're going to be talking about the RSILaguerre. So today is a U.S. holiday. So the equity markets are shut. Actually, we're not sending out any newsletters today. We're taking one of our 8 days off a year, but I wanted to get this information out to you guys today because it's one of my favorite studies. And I think after we get through today's session, I think you'll see why I like to use this one. And this is kind of an all-purpose, one-size-fits-all Swiss Army knife study that I use for just about everything out there. All right, so let's see. Before we get into anything today, make sure you don't take this as financial advice. This is just I'm expressing my First Amendment rights out there to share information with you guys. So again, today's topic is the RSILaguerre time with the Embedded Fractal Energy, or what we typically call the RSILaguerre, or we sort of abbreviate this with RSILg. So if you see me in the room or in the Discord channel or anything like that talking about the RSILg, this is what it means. Hi, how we doing out there, guys? Hi, Tig. Hey, Cryptomaniac. How you doing out there? How's everybody? It is really cold here today. It was like -6 or something. Let me do a weather check here. Hey, Google, what's the temperature in Celsius?
The current temperature in Westerville is -19 degrees Celsius.
Okay, well, there you go. -19 Celsius. So it's, hey, Google, what's the temperature in Fahrenheit?
In Westerville right now, it's -2 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, cold enough. I mean, there's other colder places out there, but it's enough to get your attention. So, interesting today. I'm actually going to go see the Peter Jackson movie, which has been they've taken all this old World War I battle footage and they've colorized it and digitized it and augmented the audio and everything like that. Really interested in seeing that, so I'll let you guys know how that turns out. But anyway, let's get moving with the task at hand here today. Hello, Panic Mode. Welcome, everybody. So for those of you that are joining live, hello. For those of you that are watching this on an archive, I'd also like to welcome you aboard wherever and whenever you're watching this. The RSILaguerre time. Okay, so an odd name for a study and probably not something that you'll ever see anywhere else. So first of all, I'd like to wish a big thank you to Cryptomaniac, who has joined us here today, for doing the heavy lifting and adapting this study to TradingView. This is something I've wanted to do for months, and I fumbled around at trying to do this myself. Couldn't get anywhere with it, and boy, all it took was one little post on the Discord channel, and this guy was all over it. So again, thank you very much for doing the heavy lifting on this. What is the RSILaguerre indicator? So today we're going to be talking about where to find it on TradingView. What is the whole Laguerre thing about? It's not just a French word for the war. It's something else here. So what are the elements of this study? How do we break this down? And then how do we eventually use it? And then I'll be going over some optional notifications, and probably at the end of this, we'll bring up a couple of charts and I'll kind of walk you guys through, maybe do a little hard right edge and show you how to use something like this. And I think you guys will have fun with this. So do me a favor today, please watch the video through one time. So whether or not you're joining me live, keep your hands off, keep your hands off the toys. Or even if you're going through an archive, just watch this through and then start to play. Now, I'm really, really bad with this. If somebody's talking on a webinar or something like that, I'll bring up another window and I'll start to play with it, and I'll completely lose track, and then I'll come back and ask questions to the presenter and saying, hey, and the response, of course, is, well, I showed that in slide 2. If you've been paying attention, you would have seen that. So I want to tell you guys I'm really bad at this, so do as I say, not as I do, if you don't mind. So first of all, where do you find this magic study? There we go. where do you find this magic study? So first of all, if you go to on TradingView, if you bring up the TradingView screen, you'll see one of the options up at the top is indicators. If you select indicators, obviously you can, there's favorites, there's built-in. This is listed under the public library, and this was just set up here yesterday. If you start typing in chop, what you'll see is that you'll see all of this. So the choppiness and the RSI, or the choppiness index, is one of the built-in studies. So we're going to be using this as part of this study. But where I want you to go is the chop_LRSI by Mr. X, the unknown. Okay, so that's how to find it. And then once you apply it, so once you click on that, boom, it gets added to your chart. So what I would do is I would start off, please don't add this to a chart that's got 16 other studies to it. I really want you guys to clean up what you're doing here. So just apply this to a naked price chart and then save it as a template. So this is typically what I'll do is I'll save this as a template to single price, indicating that it's only just got price on there and nothing else. And then RSILg, this is the template that you'll see me bring up from time to time as I'm doing the newsletter. So again, you save this as a template, save as a template, template name, whatever you want to call it. I call it single price RSILg. RSILg. Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's like I never read any manuals anyway. It's like the Christmas morning thing. Let's figure it out and see if we can blast our way through it. So what on earth is this whole Laguerre thing? Well, okay, so just about every other study uses some form of linear time element. So if you're thinking about this, like linear time element means you start from 0 and maybe you're going up to 14 or something like that. So like just about every other study uses some form of linear time element. So what you're doing is you're sampling up. So you're arriving at one, at a function of that study at day 14, or it could be minute 14 or whatever your time frame is. And it's going to break this up into individual time elements. So it's going to sample the last 14 look back and then come up with some kind of function from it. So what it's doing is it's giving equal weight to all 14 of these. Equal weight to all 14 of these, right? So we could have a 200-day moving average. So it's given equal weight to all 200 days or periods or minutes or whatever you're using to those candlesticks. Well, we're going to do things a little bit differently with the Laguerre, because the RSILaguerre uses a Laguerre time transform for the time element calculation of the RSI. So when I first got introduced to this a couple of years ago, to the RSILaguerre, the first thing I did was Google Laguerre time transform, and it's like, what on earth is this? And quite honestly, it took me back to my days of going through differential calculus, and all I saw was just a bunch of integral signs and, very complex mathematical equations trying to explain. And so from that, I sort of deduced, and I'm taking a big stretch here, but I'm using what the RSILaguerre time transform does. It's more responsive to rapid changes in price. So what it does is, instead of using that linear time element, it's going to assign a different weight depending on what's happening with the price. So it's more responsive to rapid changes in price as opposed to the lagging that affects most other indicators. So most other studies, it's like you'll see a crossover and it's like, oh, well, that was days ago. And that's why I'm always telling you guys to use price for like your breakout levels or things like that, which is also coincidentally what the Donchian channels do for you. If you're trend trading, you get above that price and boom, there's no delay right there. Okay. But as we know, things like pullbacks occur. So we don't always have the benefit of having a breakout above a former price level. So pullbacks occur, and it's a very valid way to trade as well too. So this is where the Laguerre time transform comes into play. Okay, so what's included in the indicator? Hello, Ryan. Welcome aboard. What is included in the indicator? So here's what it looks like. And what you'll see is that we got a couple of different things going on here. And I'm going to use pink. So what you'll see is that the yellow line, this is your good old CHOP index. Now, it may be a little bit more compressed. Usually the CHOP index has got the full, it's got the full weight of using the whole vertical time, or, the whole vertical expansion here. And so what we're doing is we're kind of squishing it because it's a bounded study. We're squishing it in between these elements here. So it's not going to have the vertical displacement that you're used to, but work with me here. And then it's also got the cyan or light blue line is this RSI in Laguerre time. And what you'll see is that it's an oscillator that just simply, it's a bounded oscillator that goes back and forth between 100 and 0. So it's bounded between 100 and 0. That's the highest it can go, and that's the lowest it can go. What you'll also find is that it typically, you're not going to have the same kind of analog oscillations with this. So we're not going to be using this type of study with any kind of divergence studies at all. So we're not going to be using any kind of divergence analysis for this because it's almost kind of like a square wave. Everything is either like completely overdone to the upside or completely underdone to the downside. What we care about are the crossovers. When it crosses over from oversold and out of that zone down here above 20, or when it crosses over, this is what we call hooks. When it hooks down from the overbought zone and out of there, this is what we care about, is that escape from the hook zone. So we're using both the fractal energy study or the choppiness index, depending on what you want to call it, and we're also using the RSI that's in here. Okay, so there's two different things going on, and it's easy to kind of overthink this and overdo this. So I will show you guys how I kind of use it here. Okay. All right. So what you're going to do is, you can right click on this and you can see what the inputs are. Now, one of the questions I'll get from this, and I will probably be answering this question for as long as I run this study for. Hey, Doc, why are you using a chop length of 13 when you use a chop length of 14 in the choppiness index? And the answer to that is kind of a couple of things. First of all, chop length of 13, this is a compromise. And the reason why we're compromising here is because if you get a chop length that's too long, and the original author, now I'm going back a couple of years to this, but the original author really wrote that study, the RSILaguerre, to be used with a length of maybe 7 or 8. And to me, a length of 7 or 8 doesn't really work all that well with a linear time series on the chop index. I really do prefer something around 14 for the chop length. But for this study, since we're using a shared time element, it's a compromise. 13 works pretty well. And it's not really that different from the values that you're going to find for 14. So this is something that I will use, is a chop length of 13. Chop energy threshold, we'll get into this in a minute. Upper level 61.8, lower level 38.2. You can set these to whatever you want to. And you can also, what's cool is you can highlight these crossovers, and I'll show you that in just a second. I'll show you what this means. And I typically do use a 20 and an 80 as far as the RSI zones. 20 is the oversold zone. Exiting the oversold zone comes at 20. Exiting the overbought zone comes at 80. Okay, so let's move on here. Let's go to the next page here. So this is what it looks like. And so Cryptomaniac has put in some of these. I don't know whether you want me to call you that or not, but he has put in some of these indicators. So it shows this little red dot, or you can color it whatever you want to when it's actually, when the RSI is exiting the overbought zone, and that creates a short condition is right there, okay? And also, by the same token, if it's exiting the oversold zone and hooking back up, you'll see the green or whatever indication. You can change these to arrows or lines, or you can change the color. You can do whatever you want to with them. So that's on the RSI. So those make sense. Now, what you're seeing is that if you go back, I'm going to go back. So the chop energy threshold, this is actually really cool. What he was able to do with this is he's able to show you when there's a minimum level of energy. I'm doing the air quotes here, minimum level of energy necessary to support some type of range expansion, right? So we build up the energy, it's like blowing up a balloon, right? Until at some point there's enough potential energy that's to support the next trend. And typically it's above 55, and this is what I put on this one. So you can see the yellow dots show that anytime the energy gets above 55, this is when it's ready to perhaps start to move again. And you can see that that's really is the case here. Every time we get this thing above 55, boom, it's off and running on the next move here. So it hasn't moved that much, but I would assume that in the next couple of days here, we're going to get another heavy value again for this. But you can go back and look at these again. This is just a standard application of the chop index. All right, so that's what's included on the study. You got the two different studies. You got a couple of different markers that you can put on here, which are optional. So now the question comes, how do we use this monster? What do we do? Well, there's a bunch of stuff going on in a small amount of real estate down at the bottom of your screen. How do we use this thing? Okay. And if you guys have any questions as we go along here, now would be a good time to, like, you know, if something hits you, go ahead and fire a question in, because there is a little bit of a delay that we have. So application. I find that the study is best for shorter term stuff. So I typically will use the RSILaguerre for intraday scalping, futures trades that are pretty much settled in the case of the course of a day, maybe a shorter term swing trade that lasts maybe a couple of days. I could see doing this. I typically don't do it. I don't use this study for the longer term stuff. Why? I don't really need an RSI to hook to signal to say, you better get in now. It's much more of a benefit to have that RSI hooking out of the overbought zone, setting up a short entry, or hooking out of the oversold zone, showing a long entry. On a shorter term basis, there's a lot of stuff going on when you're trading short-term futures or any kind of a short-term setup on there. And it's really helpful to have something that says, hey, I'm hooked, I'm go, you know, in you go. But on a longer term basis, you literally have days to think about something, scratch your head and go, should I enter? Do I have, you know, is this, you can use it if you want to, if you have trouble determining what the trend is, or if your uncertainty is affecting you, like, well, I'd like to enter, but I just don't feel good about this. You know, if you want something more mechanical, this is actually pretty good for that. So it's almost like a red light, green light type of study. So I'm not saying you can't use it. I'm just sharing with you guys what I do is I typically just focus on the very short-term stuff with this study. So number one, start with a chop index. So don't immediately like get overwhelmed with what's going on in there. There is a lot of stuff happening in a small chunk of real estate in here. Start with a chop index. Understand what the context is of what that is telling you. Is it in range contraction? Is it winding up, and does it have a high level of potential energy built up in there, and is it about to go? Okay, that's what the chop index will tell you. Or is it exhausted from trending up or trending down? And is it likely to either consolidate or maybe even bounce back in the opposite direction? So what's the context of what's going on? Start with a chop index there. So what is the current state right now? Is it coiling? Is it consolidating? Or is it trending? What's likely to occur next from there? If it's trending and it's in exhaustion, it's very likely to consolidate from there, or maybe even bounce back up or down, depending on which way it was trending. So we're not predicting the future here. We're just saying, well, the probability based on what we're seeing here on the chop index will let us know what state to expect next. The RSILaguerre, so the RSI, the blue line, is really only used as a trigger signal. Long, short trigger signal. And we're looking for the hook either up for a long or hook down for a short. That's it. That's all we're using that for. We're not looking for any kind of like analog signals in between. Well, the RSI is halfway in between. So what that means is if it's halfway in between, it's trending in some direction. But it flips very quickly. That's the thing about the RSI time transform is it's very quick. It's very quick. So optional stuff here. And I'm just going to go over to the live chart and let's get out of that. Let's just go over to the live chart and work with this thing for a minute here. So again, the optional stuff that you'll find is if you go over here into the settings, this is where you're going to find this. So you can either highlight the chop crossovers or not. You can highlight the RSI crossovers or not. You can set the energy threshold. I don't know what the default value is. Pretty much everything that Cryptomaniac is set on here as default is good to go. And you can also change the style if you want to. You can change, anything that you want within this. And well, there you go. Right? So there's not much to it in terms of getting it set up and running it. So if we do something like this, I mean, let's deal with some more price action. You can see how well that when we actually have trending price action, you can see how well that the short signal is right on the money here. Here's the long signal here, setting up for that. And here's the next short. I mean, it's very responsive. Normally on something like this, that would be set up with a normal analog, a normal analog oscillator. This would not make the transition this quickly. All right, let me bring up something that you're going to notice at some point sooner or later is that there is a cost for this responsiveness. The cost to the responsiveness is that you will get some false signals. So here's some false signals that are in here. And you'll actually see these change intraday. You'll see an actual hook up intraday like, hey, here's our long signal. And then by the end of the day, if it goes higher and then comes back down like these candles do, you'll see it hiding back down inside the zone. And like, hey, wait a minute. Hey, at 2 o'clock, this was showing a long, and then now this is retreated back down in here. So there is a cost for this responsiveness, is that you will get some false signals intraday. You will get some false signals intraday on there. So just be aware of that. It's just something that we have to work with. Let's see. We've seen you use the DT oscillator stuff or the study with fractals and energy occasionally before. How does it compare to RSILaguerre, and why is the latter preferred? As far as, okay, so there is, let's just go over here and talk about this for a second. Okay, so if we have, let's have a study what we call signal oscillators. Right? So signal oscillators. So let's put a catalog in here of like analog. Uh-oh. Are we still streaming? Are we still good? Yeah, I guess we're still good. Yeah, it's just my monitor just went off here. It just went blank. Okay, still good. All right, so let's say that we have an analog series of oscillators that's out there, and then we'll just say these are more digital. Okay. Still good. Okay. Yeah, it's weird. My monitor. So I'm monitoring the broadcast, just making sure everything's working here, and it's so here's let's see. We have like the DT oscillator. We have the Fisher transform. We can do slow stochastic. You guys can probably name off a whole bunch of them. So we have, standard old RSI, right? So all of these are going to be, these are all analog. And they're going to be some form of responsiveness, right? So I've used the DT oscillator before based on, oh gosh, what's the name of that character? There's a book I was reading recently where he brought up the DT oscillator. So I just don't recall the name of the guy. I'll have to bring it up sometime. And then, of course, this is about the least analog oscillator that I can imagine, which is, this is the RSILg. So this to me is about as close as to a digital type of oscillator as you're going to find. Maybe the Arun, I don't know. I've never really used the Arun oscillator. But all of these, they're good. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're all using a linear time element. They're all using a linear time element, right? So all of them are going to be somewhat more delayed than the RSILg. So this, and I would recommend that you experiment if you want to. Experiment, go back and forth. This is where I always say that you have to internalize your own strategy. You got to come up with something that you truly and fully believe in. And I like this one. I'm not trying to influence you guys. I like this one for the shorter term stuff. It's very rapid. You get a very quick hook on these things. So if you need confirmation or if you don't know how to read price action, these are very good for that sort of thing. So I would do, if you're unclear or unsure what to use, just do a bake-off. And whether that's a back testing bake-off or forward testing with live price data, just do a bake-off. And this is how you kind of build your own strategy, if you will. Okay, so signal oscillators, and this is pretty much just like everything else before that, like using the chop index or using maybe even a MACD for momentum. That's all to set up the context. What's happening with range contraction, range expansion, what's happening with any kind of divergent signals. Those are not anything, you're not really trading off of the chop index, are you? We're trading off of price action. Like if I were to look at this, I would say, hey, here's a higher low and I have energy here. I'm not trading off of the chop index. I'd be trading on a price breakout above this level. That's actually one that we took back in July. But that's the sort of thing, right? Now, do I need this study to tell me to go long on a price break above that level? No, I don't need the study to that. But I don't know where you guys are at in terms of your development. A lot of times, this is where people have difficulty with price elements, like what is a higher low? What is a higher high? Depending on the time frame. That's that sort of experience that you need to learn. But a study like this will help you by showing you, if you do get a confirmed hook and a signal and everything like that. What is a shorter time frame for me? Smaller than daily? How do I answer that question? Well, yeah, anything that's intraday, like a 5-minute or 12-minute, or depending on what's out there. Like what I will use when I trade the NASDAQ futures is actually I will use what are called tick charts. So each one of these candles are built based on a number of transactions. And so what it does is it creates these really beautiful, let's see, I could probably pull this down. I could pull down another chart and show you guys, but it creates these really nice, like almost sawtooth type wave type price actions based on the pullbacks and everything like that. But we can't do tick charts in crypto right now. Can't do it in crypto. Not enough volume. And this chart does not support tick charts yet. So I would say typically, it depends on how fast you want to trade, something like a 5-minute signal, 12-minute signal chart, something like that is typically what I'm going to be using. Okay, so again, what you want to be doing with this is looking at the context with the chop index first off. That's the, ignore the pretty stuff. First off, look for, when you have something like this, it's all like a combination of what you're doing. Okay, so we're working, we have a larger time frame trend to the downside, and what we have here is we have a bear flag. So this is a bear flag. Rising patterns break to the downside. Rising patterns break to the downside. So here you have a big bunch of energy here, which is good. And then secondarily, you have a hook to the downside. But guess what? You would have already probably seen the break in the trend line, as well as this big red candle is going to show up very quickly. If you're not in it, you're looking from the outside in on moves like that, because price takes the stairs up and the window down. Okay, so what I would recommend that you guys do, again, start off with the context of what's going on here. The context will help you, like, when you get down to this point, all right, so here's the next swing down. Okay, I want to get short, but what do you have here? You have exhaustion. Don't you dare short this thing into exhaustion. Wait for the price to come back up again. And there we go. There's the next area where you've got energy. And oh, by the way, there's your hook. So start with a chop index. Understand the context of what's going on. Understand the trend. Understand where you are in terms of the trend. Right? Even this one, here we go. Here's the next one that's coming back up again. Here it releases, and then all of a sudden, it doesn't release very far. It never gets into exhaustion. And this is where you say, hey, you don't have to use those words, but hey, if this is a higher low, this would be a higher high. This would be a change in polarity. So it's almost like a game of chess, understanding one move above that. Again, I'm still using the chop index in the same exact manner that I always was before from the Fractal Energy program or anything else that I've done with you guys. Now we have a much more responsive timing element. This is really what we've brought to this. And guess what? We don't have to chew up a whole bunch more real estate on the chart. We don't have to compress the price into something up here, like where you can't see what's going on. We can all put this, it's a very efficient use of real estate on your screen. Okay. I think that's what I wanted to cover with you guys today. So I wanted to show you how to find it, what we use it for, how to use it, why it's different, and why you might want to consider using this. This is something that I have lacked in my toolkit now for the entire time I've been trading crypto. So I have that now. So thank you once again, Crypto Maniac. You're my hero. And I appreciate that. All right. So any questions that you guys want to fire at me here in the time that we have remaining? Any questions, let me know what that is. Or if you're watching on the archive, let me know if you can just send an email into support@ReadySetCrypto.com and reference me and let me know what it is that that you just can't sleep at night until you find out. Okay, is there anything else? Anything else? Let's go over and look at a couple of other charts while I'm waiting on your questions. Okay, so that's BTC. obviously right now we're just sort of, we're waiting. And it's interesting that the RSI is already starting to bend up a little bit here. It's already starting to reflect that we're putting in an equal low. And it's starting to anticipate this, but we don't really have the energy ready yet. So I would want to see this thing obviously breaking out above 3,800 to take any kind of long on here. Otherwise, this is just stuck in a range. Okay, let's see if there's anything else moving down here. Yeah, Cryptomaniac saying if anybody wants different features, and I don't want to get into improving this. And there's also one thing I need to play around with is just the whole alert system. So alerting on the study, you can probably alert on both the chop or the RSI itself. And I didn't want to get into that today because I have not had the time to play with that yet. But quite honestly, I don't see anything else that I would want from this. So I'm sure somebody will find something to send to them. Tron looks pretty good. This is like an example of something that, now you will see, there's a guy that I work with intraday. His name is Alex. You'll see Alex in the room from time to time. And this is what we'll probably end up calling this an Alex hook. When I was first going through technical analysis, we would refer to these as, I believe it was a ghost signal. So it's not fully into the oversold zone. So this is what happens when you get shallow pullbacks in a really strong trend. You get what are called ghost signals. And so it doesn't go down into the full oversold area to produce the hook. These are still valid depending on what your rule set is. These are still valid depending on what your rule set is. So you'll find all kinds of different applications for this. So Tig is saying, in the fractal trading course, you say that you need to look at the chop on the higher time frame to determine energy of the signal chart. Well, I'm not determining the energy on the signal chart. I'm still doing it. I'm still looking at the chop on the larger time frame or the anchor chart to determine whether or not this is going to be a good signal. And that has not changed. So don't confuse the two. So you're exactly right, Tig. Typically what you'll do is you'll look at the anchor chart and make sure that the anchor chart has got a certain level of energy for that, and then the signal chart is only for. So what I'm doing here is I'm just showing you guys on a daily chart, just single time frame type of stuff, right? So I'm just trying to keep things simple for today, because that anchor chart energy will override anything that you see on the signal chart. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up today? Let's look at a couple more of these up here. See if you guys have any other questions. You guys are welcome to fire away, obviously, or hit me up in the Discord room. This is something like VeChain's setting up a great base here, but I want to see this thing really explode before it gets anywhere. Let's look at some of our swings. See if we can see anything going on here. Chainlink needs to consolidate. You'll see the energy building up. The RSI is just like buried up here just because it's so strong. We want to see this thing kind of come back down. Notice how, look at this signal here. This was a phenomenal signal. It actually included a full hook on this one with full energy. This was a great signal. In the rearview mirror, I didn't take this one. What was I doing? Oh, it was early January. Okay. Yeah, flow is just taking off right now. So there's the hook. There's the hook on here. Big energy. So we want the energy first, and then we want the hook second. We want to have the energy first, and as long as the energy is within a certain level on here, the hook second is good. Panic mode. Would you still consider volatility or Bollinger Bands with this study? Sure. Bollinger Bands are just to show you, like when something's gone a little too far, a little too fast. It kind of shows me what are the typical limits? What are the typical statistical limits for a move, which is different from the fractal energy or the choppiness index study. Cryptomaniac. So you would get into the trade in the, okay, so like what you want to do is in a perfect world. So in a perfect world, let's show how we would set up something on flow. Now I didn't do it this way, but let me show you how we would set up something like this. So I still like to use price for everything that I do. You'd never want to get away from price. Okay? So if let's see if I can set this up here. Okay, so when we have a move like this, first of all, what we want to do is we want to get out here and say, all right, let's look at this from a larger time frame context. So we were sitting there at something like this. Do we have enough energy to support this? And as long as on the anchor chart we have at least 40, 45 or so, we can consider taking a long. That it's just more of a filter, right? So if we're looking at this on a weekly chart, we have the right trend, we're playing in the direction of the anchor chart swing. That's all good. And we have at least a minimum level of energy on this one. Again, this is 13 versus, the single daily, right? But look, if we're going to take a long here, this is actually in a very shallow downtrend on the daily chart. What's going to happen to change that to an uptrend or supporting a long, right? So we have to move into an uptrend on the daily chart. And one of the things that has to happen for that is rule number 3, which is descending patterns break to the upside. So we got to see this thing break to the upside. So that could be considered an early signal right there as we break a descending pattern to the downside. We have a whole pile of energy sitting here at the daily chart. So to Tig's point earlier, the anchor chart said, okay, you have enough. We don't want necessarily, we don't have to have full energy on the weekly chart, but it's good to have enough that's on there. You don't want to short sheet this thing before it gets a chance to go anywhere. Okay, and now what you have at this point is you have the RSILaguerre picking up on this trend very quickly. Any other oscillator is going to be way behind the curve on this thing. It's going to be a couple of days behind it. So now you've got a long signal. This thing is firing long. It's saying, okay, go. Right? Now you could also say, well, look, I want to make sure it gets above 1,700 Satoshis on this. So I want to not only have it break this descending trend line, but I want it to break above the former lower high. So that is another filter that you could use if you want to. So that shows up here. And then, you're in. You've got full energy. You've got trend moving to the upside. Right now, you've got a higher high, which implies that the next low should be a higher low. And off she goes. Off she goes. I mean, that's sort of the nature of it. So that's more of a pullback type of trade. Now, this is, again, what I talked about was most of my setups are more like breakout setups. And I really lacked a good, signal that gave me like a digital binary signal that says, okay, go on a pullback long. And that's what the RSILaguerre gives me. So good example here of this one. So again, back to Cryptomaniac's question. What I am looking for is, for a long, I want to see this exit right where he has this marker here. I want to see the exit. The hook kind of gives me the confirmation that says, okay, go. Thumbs up. Go for it. But you don't necessarily want to sell up in here. Now, what you could do is you could say, I'm going to allow this thing to go as long as I want to, and when it exits, that is when you might want to sell. Or you can do it based on swing length. You can do it based on a 10%, so a fixed category for these. You can also set it up. You can also set up a sell when it goes into exhaustion. So there's any number of ways that you can determine your exit on these. Okay, any last questions for today? So again, play with this, guys. Let me know what you think. I'm very excited to have this on board as part of our strategy. And so you'll see me using this more and more on the newsletter on a daily basis, looking for entries and swings and things like that. And this will be part of, so the futures class that we do next month, this will be part of the futures class. So you'll see that integrated tightly into that as well too. So Ty, could you show us how to set up an alert on the Laguerre? I don't know. I mean, actually, Cryptomaniac would probably be a better source for that, because I don't want to necessarily do this on the High Wire Act right now, because I have not done this before. So basically what you're doing is you can add an alert on this, right? So it's going to be on the indicator. So you select the indicator, and then from there, you're going to select whether it's going to be the CHOP or the LRSI. So the CHOP is the CHOP index, and the LRSI is going to be the blue line. And so it's going to be crossing into a value which is going to be either overbought or oversold. So again, I'm just sort of making this up as I go along, playing with it. But what I would do is I would experiment with it and learn how to use it. And once I get more experience with it as well too. I have not used alerts on these myself to this point. I've used this study for live scanning, which is actually cool. If we can get this into live scanning, which unfortunately we're not going to be able to do with TradingView because it's not part of their scanner, but we can set this up on a coin by coin basis with the alerts down the road. So we'll get to that. We will get to that. All right, folks, I think we are set with today's trade school. So again, more power to you. Play around with it. Let me know what you think. And this is the first of many sessions that we'll have on this study. So thanks again, Cryptomaniac, and for everybody showing up today or in the archive, and look forward to working with you guys in the future. So you guys have a good Monday, and we will see you tomorrow. Take care now.
Aside from my soul, there goes a sight, there goes a sight. Now there goes a sight from my soul. There goes a sight from my soul.